I never told this story to anyone until today. I was 19 years old when I started working as a midwife. It was 1952, in a small town in the countryside, where the nearest hospital was 3 hours away, and there was no ambulance. Not every house had a phone. When a woman went into labor, someone would run to my house and pray I got there in time. I was trained by Donna Maria, a 67-year-old woman who had already brought more than 500 babies into the world. She knew every technique, every position, every sign of danger. But there were things even Donna Maria couldn't predict. The first time I saw someone die was 3 weeks after I started. It was a 16-year-old girl, first child. The baby was breech. Donna Maria tried to turn it, tried everything she knew, but there was no way. The girl bled to death, and the baby died with her. I never forgot the sound, the silence that took over the house when they both stopped breathing, and the screams of the girl's mother, which woke up the entire neighborhood. Back then, this was common, much more common than anyone likes to remember. But the story I'm going to tell isn't about that girl. It's about something that happened years later, something that changed the way I saw the world. It was winter of 1957. I already had 5 years of experience. People trusted me. They called me at dawn, in the afternoon, any time. And I always went. That night, someone knocked on my door at 2 in the morning. It was a desperate man, sweating, shaking. Donna Lourdes, please. My wife. The baby's coming. But something's wrong. I grabbed my bag. Always the same worn leather bag, with scissors, clean cloths, alcohol, sewing thread, needles, and I ran out. The house was about 20 minutes away on foot. When I arrived, I heard the screams before I even entered. They were screams that came from deep in the soul, the kind of scream you recognize. The scream of a woman between life and death. The woman was lying on the bed, pale, sweat pouring down her face, and blood, so much blood. The sheet was soaked. The floor had red puddles. I examined her quickly. The baby was coming, but it was stuck. The umbilical cord wrapped around its neck, tight. I could feel it with my fingers. I knew what that meant. Every second counted. Every second that passed was one less second of oxygen for the baby, and more blood lost by the mother. Hold her, I ordered the husband. Hold tight. He looked at me with wide eyes, terrified, but he did what I said. He held the woman by her shoulders. I put my hand in and tried to unwrap the cord, but it was too tight. Every time I tried to loosen it, it tightened more. The baby couldn't descend, and the mother was losing too much blood, too fast. I had to make a decision no 24-year-old should have to make. But I had no choice. If I did nothing, both would die. For sure. I grabbed the scissors, and I cut the mother, without anesthesia, without anything, because there was no other option. There was no time to get help. There was nowhere to take her. It was there, in that moment, or never. The woman screamed in a way I never forgot. A scream that came from somewhere deep, from a place where pain mixes with the desperation to keep your child alive. She arched her back, tried to pull away, but the husband held her, and I continued. I put my hand in, felt the cord, unwrapped it from the baby's neck, and pulled. The baby came out, small, wet, covered in blood, but it was blue, completely blue, not breathing. I cleaned its mouth, removed all the mucus I could, patted its back, gently at first, then harder, blew on its face, on its lips, did everything I knew, but nothing. The baby stayed blue, quiet, no reaction, and I felt panic rising. That panic that paralyzes you, that makes you forget everything you know. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't give up. So I did it again, cleaned again, patted again, blew again, and then, after what seemed like an eternity, it cried. It was a weak cry, soft, but it was a cry. The baby cried, And the mother broke down in tears, and the husband fell to his knees, and I breathed for the first time since I'd entered that house. But I still wasn't finished. The mother was still bleeding, and I had to stitch her up. I stitched her right there, with regular sewing thread, because that's what I had. There was no anesthesia, nothing for the pain. She bit down on a cloth, and I stitched, stitch by stitch, each one making her writhe. I cleaned the blood, bandaged, checked the baby again. It was breathing, weak, but breathing. And I stayed there until dawn, monitoring them both, changing the cloths, checking if there was more bleeding, if the baby was warm, if the mother didn't have a fever. When the sun rose, I left that house with trembling hands. I walked home, 20 minutes back, and with each step I felt the weight of what I had just done. I entered, locked the door, went to my room, and cried. I cried, because I had saved two. I entered, locked the door, went to my room, and cried. I cried, because I had saved two. But I knew I could have lost both. I cried because I had cut that woman with nothing for the pain. I cried because I knew this wouldn't be the last time, and it wasn't. This was my reality, and I wasn't the only one. There was Donna Aparecida, who lived 2 streets down. She was about 10 years older than me, had already seen everything. She told me about the time she had to deliver a baby inside a car. The woman went into labor halfway to the hospital. The husband stopped on the side of the road. Donna Aparecida was passing by, coming back from another delivery. The baby was born right there in the back seat of an old Volkswagen Beetle, with Donna Aparecida half crouching, half inside the car. No space, no light, nothing. She said the hardest part wasn't the delivery, it was seeing the terror on the woman's face, because she knew it could go wrong, and if it did, there was nothing anyone could do. They were in the middle of the road, alone, but it worked out. The baby was born healthy, and Donna Aparecida said it was a miracle, because it could have been a tragedy. I met Donna Nuza years later. She was from another town, but we'd meet at the markets. She was older than me, had already brought more than 300 babies into the world, but there was one she never forgot. She told me one Sunday afternoon, we were sitting on her porch, drinking coffee, and out of nowhere she started talking. It was a stormy night, heavy rain, lightning illuminating the sky, wind knocking down trees. A woman went into labor, but it was too early. 7 months pregnant. Donna Nuza was called. She had to walk almost an hour in the rain. Arrived soaking wet, cold, shivering. When she arrived, the woman was already bleeding. A lot. The sheet was red, and the baby was coming too fast. There was no way to hold it back, no way to wait. Premature babies don't wait. When they want to be born, they're born. The baby was born tiny, so small it fit in the palm of her hand. It was breathing, but it was weak, very weak. Each breath seemed like it would be the last. She wrapped it in cloths, placed it near the fire to keep warm, prayed, asked God to give strength to that tiny baby. But the mother was bad, very bad. She was unconscious, losing blood, and Donna Nuza had to choose, care for the baby or care for the mother. She chose the mother because she knew that without the mother, the baby wouldn't have a chance anyway. Even if it survived that night, there was no milk, no way to feed it, and it was too small to survive alone. She stopped the bleeding, did everything she could, pressed, stitched, prayed, and when she finally managed to stabilize the mother, she looked at the baby. It had stopped breathing. Donna Nuza picked it up and cried. She cried, holding that tiny baby, because she knew she had made the right choice, the only possible choice, but that didn't make the pain any less. When she finished telling the story, I saw tears in her eyes, even after so much time, even after saving so many other lives. We carry this for the rest of our lives. Lourdes, she said, We carry each one we couldn't save, each little face, each cry that didn't come. We carry everything, and I knew exactly what she meant, because I carried them too. There was a night I'll never forget. It was about 2 years after that delivery, with the wrapped cord. I was already more experienced, had already seen a lot, had already been through difficult situations, but that night was different. I was called for a twin delivery, 2 babies, in a house where there was barely any light, just an oil lamp lighting the room. Shadows danced on the walls, and the smell of kerosene, mixed with sweat, filled the air. The first baby was born fine, quick, no problems. It was a girl, tiny, but healthy, cried loudly, and I handed her to the father. But the second one took longer. It was in a bad position. I could feel it. It was sideways, and didn't want to come down. I tried to turn it, put my hand in, pressed on the mother's belly, but it wouldn't move. It was stubborn, and the mother was tired. Very tired. She had already spent hours in labor. When it finally was born, it didn't cry. It came out quiet, purple, no reaction. I did everything, cleaned, patted, blew, but nothing. It stayed purple, no movement. In that moment I felt something I had never felt before, a deep anger. Anger at not having the resources, anger at being there, alone, with a weak lamp, without equipment, without anything, anger at not being able to do more. But then I remembered something that Donna Maria, the midwife who trained me, had taught me at the beginning. When you think there's nothing left to do it again, and again, until you're absolutely sure, because sometimes the baby just needs one more second, one more try. So I did it again. I picked up the baby, cleaned again, more carefully, removed everything from the mouth, from the nose, patted again. Harder this time, and blew again. And this time it cried. It was a loud cry, strong, full of life. I said that cry was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard in my life, and to this day, more than 60 years later, I still hear that cry in my head. On nights when I can't sleep, when I remember everything I went through, I hear that cry, and I remember it was worth it. People today complain about hospitals, about service, about waiting, about doctors who don't pay attention. And I understand. I really understand. Because nobody likes to wait. Nobody likes to feel like just another number. But you forget how much things have changed. How lucky you are to have access to what you have. In my time, a woman going into labor was always a risk, always an uncertainty. Didn't matter how many children she'd already had. Didn't matter if the other deliveries had been easy. Each delivery was a roll of the dice. Each delivery could be the last. And I knew that better than anyone. There was a time I was called in the middle of the night. It was a woman I knew well. Her name was Rosa. She had 3 children. All had been born by my hands. All the deliveries had been smooth. No complications. But this time was different. I felt it as soon as I arrived. When I entered the room, she had a fever. High, face red, burning. And the baby wasn't moving. She said it had been hours since she'd felt movement. I knew what that meant. Infection, probably started days before, and had been spreading. And there was nothing I could do. There were no antibiotics, no medicines, nothing. I stayed there all night, praying, making cold water compresses, trying to bring down the fever. But it only got worse. With each hour that passed, she got weaker, hotter, more distant. The baby was born at dawn. Dead had already died inside her, probably hours before. And Rosa died 3 hours later. She died burning with fever, delirious, calling for her children, for the 3 she already had. Who would be left without a mother? I left that house with the sun rising, and I remember looking at the sky and feeling an enormous urge to scream, to ask why there was no hospital, why there were no medicines, why I had to stand there helpless, watching 2 people die in front of me. But I didn't scream. I just went home. washed my hands, changed clothes, and kept working, because that's what I had to do, because other women would need me, and I couldn't give up because of one loss, no matter how much it hurt. I met Dona Teresa years later at a midwives' meeting that happened once a year in the neighboring town. We'd gather to exchange experiences, to learn from each other, to vent. Dona Teresa worked in the Amazon, in a region so isolated I couldn't even imagine. She told me the nearest hospital was 2 days away by boat. 2 days. If the river was good, if it hadn't rained, if there was nothing in the way. She told me a story that kept me awake for days. She was once called for a delivery in an indigenous village. The woman had been in labor for 2 days. 2 days, and nobody knew what to do. They had already tried everything, every position, every prayer. Nothing worked. When Dona Teresa arrived, after 6 hours by boat and 3 hours walking, the woman was almost unconscious, from so much pain, so much exhaustion, so much fear. Dona Teresa examined her and saw the baby was in the wrong position, completely sideways, horizontal. There was no way it could be born like that. It was impossible. She knew it needed a cesarean. It was the only chance, but there was no way to do it. There was no structure, no anesthesia, no proper instruments, nothing, and she knew that if she did nothing, both would die. For sure, the woman wouldn't last another day, and the baby was already in distress. So she did something that, to this day, she doesn't know if it was right or wrong, something she had never done before, and never did again. She tried to turn the baby with her hands, from the outside, pressing on the mother's belly with all the strength she had. It's a dangerous technique, very dangerous. Can rupture the uterus, can kill the mother, can kill the baby, can kill both, but it was the only chance. The woman screamed, cried, thrashed, but the other women from the village held her, and Dona Teresa continued. She pressed, pushed, tried to guide the baby to the right position, and it worked. After 20 minutes, that seemed like hours, the baby turned and was born, crying, healthy, and the mother survived. But Dona Teresa told me she never did that again, because she knew she had been lucky, very lucky, that she could have killed both, that she shouldn't have risked it. I did it because I had no choice, Laura's, she said, holding my hand, but I know I shouldn't have. I know it was too risky, but what was I going to do? Let both die? I couldn't. I couldn't just stand there with my arms crossed, watching it happen. I understood perfectly, because I had already made decisions like that. Impossible decisions. Decisions no one should have to make. Decisions that wake me up to this day in the middle of the night, asking myself if I did right. And we carried that for the rest of our lives. Each decision, each choice, each face. I stopped working as a midwife in 1965. I was 32 years old, still young, still had many years ahead. The reason was simple. I lost a friend of mine. Her name was Joanna. We had grown up together, played together. She was like a sister to me. She got pregnant. 4th child. The other 3 had been born fine, no problems, but this time was different. She started feeling sick in the 7th month, swelling, headaches, high blood pressure, all the signs of eclampsia. I begged her to go to the hospital, but she was afraid. Afraid to leave the other children, afraid to spend money, afraid of hospitals. She called another midwife, not me, because she knew I would insist she go to the hospital, and she didn't want to hear that, and she died in childbirth. She and the baby, from eclampsia, something that could have been treated, something that could have been prevented. When I found out, I felt something break inside me. I realized I couldn't do it anymore, couldn't carry that weight anymore, couldn't keep seeing people die from things that could be avoided, couldn't keep making these impossible decisions. I started having nightmares. Every night I dreamed about the deliveries that had gone wrong, about the babies who didn't survive, about the mothers I lost, about Rosa. about the 16-year-old girl, about Donna News's premature baby, about Jana. I would wake up sweating, crying, and couldn't sleep anymore. I knew I had saved many more people than I lost. I knew I had made a difference, that many women and babies were alive because of me. But it's the ones you lose that stay in your head. It's their faces you see when you close your eyes. It's the cries that didn't come, that you hear in the silence of the night. I went years without talking about it. My children knew I had been a midwife, but I never told them the details, never talked about the sleepless nights, about the blood, about the screams, about the deaths, about the impossible decisions. I kept everything inside, locked it in a deep place, and tried to forget. But you don't forget. These things don't get forgotten. They stay there, waiting, and from time to time, they come back. But now I'm old. I'm 85 years old, and I realized that if I don't tell these stories, they'll die with me. And they can't die, because people need to know, need to understand how things were. So they won't forget. So they'll value what they have now. It's easy to forget, easy to think it was always like this, that there was always a hospital, always a doctor, always anesthesia, always medicine. But it wasn't always like this, and it wasn't that long ago. I'm still here, alive, telling. It was in my time, in your grandmother's time, your great-grandmother's time. I saw things no one should see, did things no one should have to do, and saved lives that without me would have been lost. And I wasn't the only one. There were hundreds, thousands of women like me scattered all over Brazil, in every small town, in every village, in every forgotten corner, working in silence, without recognition, without a steady salary, without anything but the gratitude of the families we helped, and sometimes not even that, sometimes just the weight of loss. There were nights when I prayed more than I worked, because there were things beyond my control, and I knew that no matter how much I knew, no matter how much experience I had, there were things only God could solve. There were nights when I came home smiling, because everything had gone well, because mother and baby were fine, because I had seen that magical moment, when the baby cries for the first time, and the mother smiles, and everything was worth it. That was worth all the bad nights, all the losses, all the suffering. But there were nights when I came home crying, because it hadn't gone well, because I had lost someone, because I knew it could have been different, if there had been a hospital, if there had been a doctor, if there had been resources, and that weighed on my soul, in a way I can't explain, a weight that doesn't leave, that stays there, forever. People today don't know how lucky they are, don't know how much things have changed, don't know what a privilege it is to be able to call an ambulance, to be able to go to the hospital, to be able to have anesthesia, to be able to have doctors, to be able to have tests. Today, when I see a pregnant woman going to the hospital, I think about everything I went through, about all the women I attended, about all the deliveries I did, about all the sleepless nights, and I'm grateful that she doesn't have to go through what the women of my time went through, grateful that she has chances the others didn't have.
But I also remember this is new, very new, just a few decades, and that it had a cost. The cost of many lost lives, of many babies who didn't survive, of many mothers who died, and of many women like me who carried traumas forever. I was a guardian of life. I stood on the front line, between life and death, made decisions in seconds, decisions that could save or kill, and did the impossible with almost nothing, with an old leather bag, with scissors, with sewing thread, with clean cloths, and with my own hands. There were days I woke up and asked myself if I could keep going, if I could face one more night, one more delivery, one more chance of losing someone, one more impossible choice. But I kept going, because I knew that if I didn't go, who would? Who would help those women, who would bring those babies into the world? So I went. Every time someone knocked on my door, every time they called me, rain or shine, day or dawn, tired or not, sick or not,
I grabbed my old leather bag and went, because those women needed me. Those babies needed me, and I couldn't let them down. Today, when I look back, I see everything I went through, and I don't know if I would do it all again, because it was too heavy, too difficult, too painful. But I also know I saved lives, many lives, and that counts. That has to count. So I tell these stories now to my grandchildren, to my great-grandchildren, to whoever wants to listen, because they can't be forgotten, because every baby I brought into the world was a miracle, every mother who survived was a victory, and every loss was a pain. I carry to this day. This is my story, the story of a midwife, of a woman who saw things no one should see, who did things no one should have to do, but who did what had to be done, because there was no other choice, because it was that or let people die, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't stand there with my arms crossed, so I did it, everything I could, with everything I had, until I couldn't anymore. Watch the next video.